This week saw a lot of news um, with this reconciliation package, the reconciliation bill. It's been a week of furious internal parliamentary negotiations within the Democratic caucus. The Republicans they're on the sidelines in this one. The Democrats only have themselves to deal with and to blame for the success or the failure of the reconciliation package. But it's been quite remarkable to see because while it is all kind of very inside baseball, it's not like we can really affect anything that happens within it. It was kind of interesting to see the progressive members of the House, the so-called Congressional Progressive Caucus, hold the line. They really held the line amidst pressure that would usually have caused them to cave instantly in recent years. But the basic outline is that the Biden has two main signature pieces of legislation that are sort of defining his first term. One is this kind of bipartisan infrastructure bill. He was obsessed with making it bipartisan because he is a Senate institutionalist and believes in the idea of bipartisanship very deeply. And so he created this awful bill that it was so bad that they can get even like a bunch of Republican senators to join and support it. Like, that's how bad it is that even Republicans are supporting it. And at the same time, they created this larger $3.5 trillion over 10 years reconciliation bill that would pass through reconciliation, which means that no Republicans are needed. And that was kind of the deal. We'll give you the awful bipartisan infrastructure bill if you give us this pretty decent 3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. And those two bills were supposed to be linked together. They were supposed to pass together, even though they were separate pieces of legislation. And as soon as the rubber hit the road, conservative Democrats were like, no. How about we pass them separate? We'll pass the infrastructure one first, and then we'll talk about the reconciliation one. And Bernie and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, like the squad, AOC, they're like, no. We're not doing that. We're doing them both together. That was the deal. And basically, the conservative Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, tried to renege on the deal and force through a vote. And the progressives held the line. They held the line. For the first time, basically, in my lifetime, the left wing of the Democratic caucus was able to stand together and basically throw enough sand in the gears to force the other side to come to the table in a negotiation. This doesn't mean anything's going to happen. It doesn't mean that the bill's going to pass. It doesn't mean that even if the bill does pass, that it's going to be any good. But in the short term, it showed that they could flex a little muscle, which is a good thing in and of itself. Cale, I don't know how you read. How have you been reading the intrigue in the halls of Congress?
I think your summary makes a lot of sense. I think it's important just to highlight just the position of weakness that the left is in this, that effectively, if the bills were separated, if it was just all of the expansion of Medicaid, childcare, green energy programs, if all of that is on its own, it dies. There's no chance. And it might still be cut from this compromise deal. That it's just the fact that because of our electoral system is set up such that every single individual politician is kind of a party unto themselves. They don't really have, the party itself can't really discipline its members. Pelosi can't say to the Progressive Caucus, vote this way or I'll kick you out of the party, and vice versa. The Progressive Caucus has no means of, keeping their members voting in a certain way. It's like pretty remarkable that this has been working as, so far as it has. And, we might eat those words by the end of the day. We'll see. But, we're recording on Friday. But it is, like you're saying, it is pretty remarkable that this is happening now, that this is maybe the first time in a very long time, in part because it's the first opportunity in a very long time for this kind of vote to happen, or this kind of coordination to happen. it should have happened under Obama in '09 when the Democrats took control of both houses, the House and the Senate. And the problem there was that basically because Obama and the Democrats had such large majorities in both chambers, that really meant that the conservative Democrats had the majority in both houses, in both chambers. So like the left really didn't have any leverage, even though the Democrats broadly, had much greater power at that time. And so, that just speaks to the fact that like we have something of a burgeoning left. It happens to be effective because of the fact that Biden has only so much support in these bodies, and because of the fact that politicians can wield power at this very kind of individual level. But really, yeah, like you're saying, I mean, I would guess like the last time, I don't have a specific idea in mind, but it was probably like early 70s, like at the latest, when you had something like a true kind of progressive wing of the Democratic Party that actually could fight back at times.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I think that it's interesting that Ilhan Omar is the whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and it seems like she and the leadership have tried to, in the past couple of years, institute, to the extent that it's possible in the American system, a method to essentially create that kind of coherent bloc within. You talk about like how these politicians are parties unto themselves. Like they've tried to the extent that they can in the past couple of years create some sort of sense of like, no, if we vote as a bloc, regardless of what it is, or regardless of whether an individual kind of agrees with it or not, we will in the long run have much more strength and power. And this is the first time really that's been put to the test, and it's worked. Like again, usually this kind of maneuver would have just crumbled at the first, like, you just flick at the thing and the whole thing just would have collapsed. But I think that it's like, again, it's by no means like a major victory or anything like that, but it is an interesting difference that has happened. And again, it shows just how much work has to go into even do this like kind of tiny little difference within the halls of power. Think about like the last 5 or 6 years of left organizing, of left media, of knocking on doors, of the Bernie campaigns and all that stuff. And we're just seeing like a slight shift, but it is there and it's real. And it could be the beginning of something if this kind of continues, but it just shows just how difficult it is to really change the calculus of power and the balance of power within the halls of Congress under current conditions.
Yeah, well, just two more thoughts maybe. The first is just that, so in capitalism, of course, politicians are going to be, they're going to have the interests of capital in mind when they're making decisions, because of just the nature of the fact that capitalists own all the stuff, and the state is basically saying, hey, please allocate resources this way. Please, give us this much in taxation so that we can do X, Y, Z. That because of the separation of politics from the economy between the state and capitalists, it does typically mean that politicians are going to be doing what they think is in the best interest of capitalists. Now, this is a somewhat significant situation given the economic condition that we're in. And I do think, so in addition to that, there's two other things. The fact that, there really is no formal leverage on the left for left politicians in the way that there used to be when you had a labor movement, or, in other countries where you have more formal mechanisms, institutional mechanisms for disciplining people. And so the fact that, the caucus has held together as long as it has, in these negotiations, and hopefully will be able to to force through these items through the bill, the Medicaid expansion, childcare, green energy, etc. But the thing is that like the way capital operates right now is like I think the good counterexample is someone like a cinema or a mansion where like cinema and mansion do not have to think about what's in the interests of capital. They're probably just getting a check in the mail. Like that's like from everything we know about what's going on, like there's probably just very specific, investors who are paying them and saying, this is how you're voting. You don't have to think about it. Not that these people can think much anyways, but so it's conceivable that like that method could be, like there's nothing stopping that from happening to people in the Progressive Caucus. And that remains the issue as we look forward to, how to build on these wins, that like these progressive politicians, unless there's institutions that can safeguard, their best intentions, let's say, it's very likely that they will probably, it's very easy for capital to just come in and kind of steamroll them and tell them how to vote. But the other thing I wanted to mention, contrasting this with the past again, is I've been thinking a lot about, or I've been trying to read as much as I can about the first, 200 days or so of FDR's administration. Because when FDR came in, he also didn't have, institutions. He didn't have a labor movement. He didn't have the things that, I'm just saying right now we should have in order to be able to hold these politicians to the interests of working people. He effectively was able to pass through his agenda. And I think it speaks to two things. One, the kind of the chain loosening a little bit on politicians in a moment of economic crisis, that we are living through a moment where it does seem like there's maybe something's more possible in the realm. This is like the fact that we're even discussing, Medicaid expansion or green energy jobs, is pretty remarkable, and I think has a lot to do with COVID and the economic fallout. But it also has to do with the fact that, whether or not this is, dependent on that Biden is in fact kind of holding to this program, that he's in agreement that we should be pushing for. He does not agree with like what Bernie's like proposing wholesale. He does not agree with like everything that Jayapal is proposing, but he agrees with enough of it that like he's not just, bringing the hammer down and squashing this immediately. And again, for better or worse, it is the case that in American politics, the executive branch does have this kind of power, that he is, if we got the campaign Biden, I don't, which we were expecting, I would be very shocked to hear, if you had told me a year ago that this is what Biden is prioritizing right now, it wouldn't have made sense to me. And so again, I don't know what that says, if that was something like, if he was just making, real politique calculations of, I got to campaign on this, even if I want to push for something else, or if if COVID changed his politics, if Bernie has been persuasive, I don't really know. But the fact that Biden has been more open to the Progressive Caucus and the demands, and not just coming down on the side of whatever business wants, is remarkable. And that's not to we don't have to say thanks to Biden just yet, but it is significant, and it presents opportunities for the left, and so we should see it as an opportunity rather than as a congratulatory thing for Biden or something.
Well, you mentioned Kirsten Sinema, I guess, and it's funny because Axios a couple weeks ago ran this like hilarious piece in which they talked about her spreadsheets and how she has Excel spreadsheets, and that's how she kind of decides what she votes on in the budget stuff or whatever. This morning they have a follow-up piece about Kirsten Sinema, which says, Kirsten Sinema's allies have some free advice for anyone trying to bully the wine-drinking triathlete into supporting Biden's $3.5 trillion budget bill. She doesn't play by Washington's rules, and she's prepared to walk away. It's like, oh, she drinks wine. Oh, she just triathlons. Yeah, you can't bully this queen into supporting the thing that helps people. No sirree, Bob, no way.
She can't legally drive right now. She's just above the limit.
She's too
just
drunk.
So wasted making these votes.
And then apparently, like I'm seeing on Twitter right now that she just left DC. So that's fun. So yeah, well, that's the state of play. Slight flexing of a muscle from the Progressive Caucus for the first time maybe ever, but it's still unclear what's going to happen. Things maybe could go up, could go down. A lot of what have yous in between. If you enjoyed this video from Jacobin Weekends, please hit like and subscribe. That way, you'll enjoy all of our backlog, as well as all of our future content, including interviews, live streams, and clips. Thank you.